What up, Gambler guys? We are not going to talk about anything gambler in this video. So I'm with my buddy Alex Arsenko, Senko Sticks, if you guys have seen him online. And what we're going to talk about is sort of misconceptions, I guess you'd call them, when it comes to analyzing a rod. And Alex, you're going to laugh at me. When I was a kid, up until I was like 20-some years old, I'd go to Walmart, I'd go to the local tackle shop, I'd buy a rod, and my selection point was all based on action. But I thought action meant like medium heavy, things along those lines, which is 190% wrong. So tell me, what does action actually mean in a rod for guys who are just getting started?
So there's three basic actions. You got fast, you got moderate fast,
okay,
and then you got moderate.
Right.
So obviously you have your extra fast, and then you have your slow moderate and your moderate. So there's
complex.
there's several different actions. But long story short, when you have a fishing rod blank and that rod has a softer tip and
right.
that tip is very flimsy,
yeah.
typically you're gonna have a fast or an extra fast action rod.
But it's just like the tip portion,
just the tip,
deal.
just like just the tip portion
end.
Yes, exactly. So when you're saying common misconception, your fast action might be my extra fast action.
Okay.
So rod brands all across the board kind of have a different scale as far as what they scale, but traditionally, just to give you an example, a moderate rod is going to bend like a rainbow. It's going to bend all the way down to the reel seat.
Just like a cranking rod or something like that. Okay.
Or a cranking rod reaction style.
And that's also called parabolic bend.
Right, parabolic. Okay. And what's unique about our blanks is that you can get a fast action, but at the same time you can get, it's like a dual action where you can get more moderate action out of the rod once it's under a load, because statistically speaking, a more parabolic rod lands more fish.
I agree with that 100%. Like, you don't want like a wet noodle, you know, but like especially like my mat rod and that, I'll use something that I would describe it's fast,
right,
but it's a very slow fast. And these are the kind of like nuances that you got to be thinking about. I don't care if you're flipping, throwing a worm in that. We all, and me and you talked about it, Alex, we all have different preferences. So if you kind of understand the rod build and some of the language behind it, you can kind of analyze sort of how it's going to perform for the way that you want. Because we're all, it's like women, dude. I like certain types, you know, like looks and that, and rods are the same, you know? So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is we covered kind of like action and how action isn't like medium heavy. That's sort of a rating and what the manufacturer recommends on like how much weight you can use. Right. And it's not 100% like the golden rule. Like I've thrown giant swim baits on like rods that are rated up to like 1 ounce, and it's like a 3-ounce swim bait.
Like you said, your medium heavy could be my medium.
Yeah, exactly.
So it ranges from brand to brand. So but statistically speaking, though, on a rod blank, you have, you know, the faster the action, the softer that tip is going to be, the more tip play you're going to have.
Right.
As you get into a moderate fast, you're going to have more bend throughout the rod blank, so a little bit actually deeper into the rod blank.
Right.
And then a moderate, you're going to be down into the reel seat almost.
Okay. And that's what you're talking about with backbone then too, because that kind of translates into backbone. If you have like an extra fast tip, you're going to have a lot of backbone. How heavy that backbone is depends on the rod blank rating.
Right.
So the other thing that I want to ask you about is we've seen a lot of changes like with rod butts over the years, dude. Like I even remember way back when I was a little kid, you'd watch like, Bassmaster and stuff, dude, and they were using those little, dude, the pistol grip. Yeah. Like they'd roll those Larry Nixon and all that. Yeah. So what are obviously we've transitioned into some longer butts, but we were just talking off camera and you kind of mentioned some things I never thought about it. Some guys prefer a little bit shorter, some guys prefer a little bit longer. What are sort of the benefits and consequences of varied lengths? Like what's good with a short, but what's the cost of it? What's better with a longer rod butt? Like what's your play when you're analyzing a rod?
So let's just use the 7.3 as an example. Okay. So this is a 7.3 rod. This is a 10 3/4 inch handle length. That's I measure my handle length from the rod butt right to where the rear grip meets the reel seat.
Okay.
So with this handle length, I'm going to get a certain action, but if we go ahead and move that handle length half an inch up, that rod's going to become slower and it's actually going to become less powerful.
So when you say slower, it's going to be more of a moderate. Okay.
Yes.
So this translates right into the action.
It's going to load throughout the blank more.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, and it's actually going to become a softer rod. So the more you move this reel seat back towards the rod butt, say we cut it down to 10 inches, you're going to have a more stout, more powerful rod.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the other thing is, what does it do with balance, I guess? That's something that we always talk about. Like, you can have a super light rod, and if it's not balanced, it actually feels heavy or tip heavy you run into. So how does the where the reel seat is and the length of the butt play into that balancing of the rod?
Yeah, so I mean, the balance is huge, and as as you move that reel seat further back, that
Uh-huh.
rod becomes more tip heavy.
So the
that's-
further back, so the further forward you move it, it balances it out.
Yes.
But then there's a fine line where it starts leaning forward then,
Exactly.
too.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if somebody's going into to buy a rod, what would like the 3 top things, no matter what technique you're looking to use it for, what are the 3 top things that you'd recommend that they look at and analyze before moving forward to make sure that rod's going to kind of fit them in their style?
So first, I'd say you got to have whatever bait you're trying to throw if you're trying to get a technique-specific rod, I'm assuming.
Right.
So first, you got to obviously have that technique dialed in. You got to know what you like, because you might throw a chatterbait on a fast action, and I like it on a moderate fast action. So
Okay.
you kind of got to dial in exactly what you want. So then you're going to probably want to look up that company's, see if they have their rod flexed on a chart, so you can kind of see the bend of the rod, where that
That's a
rod
good
shuts
point.
off
Yep.
the power and whatnot. And I mean, from here on out, then you got to figure out your handle length, because you might like a shorter handle length than I do. And then you got to make sure with the manufacturer that the rod is balanced as well with that shorter handle.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that you kind of got to look into, as far as, when you're looking for a technique-specific rod. But as far as, there's no perfect one rod that's for everybody.
It's all relative.
It's all relative. So I mean, you may really love this certain rod, and another guy might think you're crazy for liking that rod. So
I've heard that.
it is
before,
all
actually.
relative. But again, like, you gotta, like, let's just use a chatterbait for an example.
Okay.
I've had guys tell me that they want a super short handle, and I've had guys want a long handle from pulling it through grass all day long, where they're, they have plenty of support up in their side.
Yep.
So it really is all relative when it comes to choosing that perfect rod. What you're gonna like is gonna be different than what I'm gonna like. So I think the basics are, figure out what you like as far as balance. So you might like a tip heavy rod on a chatterbait.
That's true, because
Some guys
have
have asked me for a tip heavy rod on a chatterbait. So if someone asks me for a tip heavy rod and they want a longer handle length, it's going to make it harder for me to put weight towards the tip of the rod. So I'm going to have to choose a different blank. Then I'm going to have to match the power and the action that they want to that blank.
So what you're saying is go buy a custom rod from
Well,
Alex.
what I'm
He's
really
just
saying,
selling,
what I'm
dude.
really saying is, if you want a perfect rod, I suggest to go custom. But if you're looking for something generic, you want something that's balanced within 1 to 2 inches of the reel seat. If you have your reel on there, you want that rod to sit straight, just like that.
Wow.
So you want something within a couple of inches in the front of the reel seat. That way I know this rod is perfectly balanced for this handle length.
And it all syncs up.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess that's kind of the trick. You have to know thyself
Yep.
before you know thy
Without a
rod.
doubt.
Look at the action, look at the rating. Is it going to address the bait that you want to throw?
Right.
Understand like how you want it balanced. Are you going to be pointing the rod tip down, or is this like a technique where you're going to be pointing up, so you need that perfect balance on the rod? Look at the weighting on the rod. Does it sit right? And then you can do the little test.
Yeah. And I think the ultimate, to really answer the question,
Yeah.
if you go with an all-purpose style rod for most things, from then on you can say, okay, I want this rod to shut off. I want it to be a faster action. I
That's a
want the
good
backbone to
point.
kick in first.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to start off with an all-purpose style rod.
Set the bait
and
line.
then capitalize off that and say, okay, I need this action to be faster, or I want it to be more moderate. I'm losing fish now.
Right.
Then you get into freaking treble hooks, and then it's like a whole
Right.
different rod blank as well. So like there's a lot of things, but I would suggest to start off with an all-purpose style rod, and then go from there and say, hey, like, I think this rod is shutting off too soon.
Right.
I need a more moderate rod.
And then tweak that based on.
And then tweak from there, and then figure out your handle lengths, figure out where you're getting your bruises on your side and whatnot. And if
do
you
you
need
like it
shorter
or not?
longer.
Kind of
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, check Alex out. It's kind of a basics. Like I said, there's a lot of, and I've had them too, a lot of misconceptions when it comes to buying a rod. And you really have to kind of, like I said, know thyself before you move in. If you guys got any questions, go check out Alex at Senko 6. You can find him on Instagram and that. But hit that like and subscribe button. Buy the right rod for the right technique, but more importantly, the right rod for you.
Definitely.